healthcare is not getting simpler, it's getting more complex, and whether it's the services or the treatments and the technologies, is that we're increasing in complexity, and we need tools that are actually going to help us understand that. I remain convinced that actually we can predict a lot of flow challenges and harm events from people as soon as they appear in the front door. Let's say we had a model of an ED that was well validated, and actually we're putting in data in a real-time basis, is that we could be giving heads up to the rest of the hospital and potentially the wider system of we've had a bad day in the ED, is that that in 24 hours we're going to have a difficult challenge. Imagine putting a simulation into that.
Hello everybody, I am Tom Stevenson and I am a Director of Services and Strategic Partnerships at Simul8. And welcome to another episode of Simul8 Meets. This is our series of interviews with industry thought leaders. And today in the hot seat, I'm very pleased to introduce someone that I've had the privilege and pleasure to work with on several occasions, Dr. John Boulton. Hello John and welcome. Please could you just start off by introducing yourself to our audience and give us just a quick history of your career in quality improvement in healthcare?
Yeah, of course, Scott, Tom, it's really good to see you again. So I'm John Boulton. I'm currently the National Director of Quality Improvement and Patient Safety here in NHS Wales. So I've been in this role now for the last five years or so. But my sort of improvement journey is probably over the last sort of 15 years. So I trained as a doctor originally, got very interested in sort of systems and improvement work whilst I was a trainee. Led some of work around outpatient transformation in a trust in Sheffield in the UK. Got the opportunity to spend some time in the US working with the Institute for Healthcare Improvement, and then also spent a couple of years working in improvement out in the Middle East before coming back to the UK and then moving to Wales.
Great, thank you. Yeah, and I think I've probably worked with you to some degree in a lot of those roles. It'd be good to just start off with some of the work that you've done in the NHS. Good to think about the work that you've done in this, and in particular the role that simulation has played along the way.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So when I was working in Sheffield, a really good colleague of mine, Gary Fothergill, had just started using simulation, and I was getting sort of really quite frustrated with some of my own sort of clinical work. I had very big queues in my outpatient clinic, and when I saw it, it just really sort of blew my mind in terms of the sort of art of the possible when you're actually thinking about using simulation to sort of understand the problem and a challenge and then sort of develop solutions. So my journey in and around simulation then sort of gradually increased. I think it's taken me quite a few years to actually develop that sort of real expertise where I feel comfortable with the software, because I think sometimes it just takes time to actually develop that. But I spent a lot of time right at the start really using sort of simulation to understand some of the sort of really quite difficult concepts. I had really great mentors when I was learning improvement science, and really struggling to understand what impact of variation in cues and all of those things that we talk about a lot now really helped me understand it.
Fantastic. Yeah, I mean that's really good that you mentioned there that you've been a big user of the software, but also been in senior leadership positions, and I think that's a really powerful combination. And you spoke about maybe being able to learn more about concepts. Do you find that that's been quite a helpful thing in a leadership role, to sort of know how to use the software as well as having a team that can use it?
Yeah, no, absolutely. And if I was honest, just coming out of the pandemic, we perhaps not used it as much as we'd like to, but it's certainly something that we as a team picking back up on and really keen to actually use. I've used it a couple of times in sort of leadership positions, to whether it's to sort of move a conversation on to actually just sort of challenge a concept or some thinking within, you know, meetings that I'm supporting or facilitating, but equally at the same time is using it with, you know, some really quite large and detailed models that I've worked with myself, but also supported with others to sort of challenge current thinking.
Great, thank you. And then, so I know you said you've not really used it as much as you'd like over the past couple of years, but you know, over the 5 years in Wales, it'd be good to hear about any of the particular, you know, cases or simulations that you've worked on, or in Sheffield as well.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So, you know, I think it was the work that was going on in Sheffield that really got me interested in simulation. So there was a model looking at a sort of orthopedic treatment centre, and just sort of really understanding the number of beds required to sort of manage that centre without spilling over into other units, which was just fascinating when, you know, you got to see the little people running around, and there was a doctor that arrived at the bed, etc. And it's really engaging, which, you know, that was what piqued my interest. We then developed some models around outpatients, and I still use the outpatient models when I'm talking about outpatients even now, and that they're validated really well against the data, which again, I think is something that always sort of really sort of excites me when you're able to actually sort of demonstrate the output from the simulation and it's looking very similar to the data that you're looking at in the you know, administration system. So there was some great work that I saw in Sheffield, and I think some of it still continues in Wales. And I'll be honest, it's one of the pulls for me from the Middle East to Wales was I got to work very closely with a really good modelling team that I think you know really quite well in one of the health boards. And, you know, there's a long history of simulation, operational research, and mathematical modelling in Wales, which was just a huge pull. Lots of simulations going on in Wales in that team that I worked with. Lots of, you know, mathematical modelling. We did some work around ophthalmology, looking at the effects of community treatment centres, as well as the effects of what happened if we changed the priority queues, if we increased the number from, you know, urgent, soon, and routine to maybe more queues, what would happen? And we managed to sort of challenge some of the mental models around that. I think, if I was honest, there was what I would describe as a successful model is that one of the things that the team did is created a system-wide bed model that looked at all of the beds across the whole of the health board. And actually it validates really well, and I still occasionally open it up and actually have a look at it and just think, this was a really good model. I think one of the challenges that we had is that the complexity of the model at that time just took a really considerable time and effort, and it got to the point where we were running out of time and decisions needed to be made, so we didn't quite get to the point where we were able to complete the model and really sort of utilize it. You know well as well, Tom. You've been to Wales and you've supported the National Wales Modelling Collaborative,
yeah,
which I think is a really great initiative in trying to actually build these skills into healthcare and into the health boards, and that continues to be a very active programme of work within Wales. Members of my team support that, and I think, you know, it's great to actually start seeing people actually starting to build these models more generally. I think if you went over to the Middle East, and again, is that you and I did some work in the Middle East together, where you were great in bringing out you know, all of the training materials and actually helping us train a team. But we built some fantastic models there. One of them was to support the expansion of a blood donation service, as we were thinking about planning for the World Cup, and there'd been a recent sort of quite significant accident in Doha, and they were really wanting to make sure that they have the capacity to actually support a sort of a disaster. And we worked with a team, and what was just really fantastic, and again, I think it's a really great example of the power of simulation, is that we put the model up, and the lead for the donation service said, "That's my unit," which, you know, they recognised it instantly, and, you know, we really helped them actually work through and actually get the capacity right, but also get all of the other elements right. They were convinced they needed more donor chairs, and what we were able to actually show is actually not necessarily more donor chairs, more people to assess as the donors are coming into the unit.
That's really interesting to see how, you know, having that visual element that you mentioned earlier can help support people, first of all, resonating straight away with their part of the simulation, but also helping creating a business case for change that, you know, might not be obvious to people. So it sounds like there as well that it's quite nice to see there's quite a mix of the more high level, big picture stuff, but also some of the more granular modeling as well. You know, being able to look at beds across all of Wales is a really good, you know, use case, but then also focusing on like one blood donation clinic. And I guess there's all different types of simulations in between, but it's just really nice to see that, you know, you're looking at it, using it in that big overall sort of strategic level as well as the more operational side of things.
Yeah, and I think, you know, there's just huge opportunity for us to use this, and you know, I think you and I have had the conversation before as we've been working together, is that we just don't use these tools enough, whether it's Simul8 or whether it's some of the, you know, wider, you know, modeling sort of tools and concepts that are out there. But you know, one of the things that I still go back to is just the simple models that you can build very quickly within Simul8 can really just help people move on when they start to understand is, you know, why are we talking about queues? Why are we talking about variation? Why are we talking about, you know, prioritization in queues may not be necessarily the ideal thing to do, and just to be able to just quickly build a model or challenge some thinking, I think is, you know, again, really powerful, whilst at the same time, you know, as working out how to your point, we build these, you know, really quite large strategic models that actually help sort of senior leaders and decision makers really think.
Yeah, but as you say, you know, that educational piece is really powerful. Even without building a big complex model, it's good to see that you're able to get a lot of value and just help people, you know, understand the system that they work in a little bit more. So, I mean, I guess you'll be as aware of me. There's probably not a day goes by where we don't see at least one story in the media about, you know, growing backlogs for like NHS appointments. Would you see Simul8 having a role in tackling this?
I think this is where I used simulation the first time, is that when I was a rheumatologist, I had huge backlogs in my clinic and I just had no understanding as what was causing them. And, you know, for me to be able to sort of build up a model that actually I could understand the sort of referral rates coming in, how often I was seeing people, how many non-attendances, etc., and cancellations, and how all of that sort of fit together and sort of produce the sort of output, is I think it has huge opportunity to help people understand what the system is doing and how the system actually behaves and the dynamics that actually cause that behavior. But equally at the same time is that I think, you know, we still plan to average, is that we still use spreadsheets to plan, and you know, even though we know that that's not the right way to do it, is that Simul8's got a real opportunity to actually help people actually think about planning more effectively, that we can build in that variation, that we can understand the impact of, you know, the patient not attending or the clinic being cancelled, etc. So it gives us a much better opportunity to actually plan forward. And I think, you know, that's something that I think we need to get better at, is that we need to shift, but equally at the same time is that we need to build the skill sets to help us shift away from this notion of plan to average.
Yeah, absolutely. Especially when these services, you know, they're going to have upstream and downstream challenges as well that might not be quite so clear if you're, you know, working in the middle.
Yeah, and you know, healthcare is not getting simpler; it's getting more complex. And you know, whether it's the services or or the treatments and the technologies, is that we're increasing in complexity, and we need tools that actually are going to help us understand that. And I think Simul8's a great opportunity to help us understand that complexity in more detail, but also maybe help us predict a little bit into the future. Is what do we need to do?
That's a really good point, because I mean, I don't think the impact of COVID has helped a lot of things, but it's certainly, we're now in a position where we probably need to project forward, and you layer on top of that things like aging populations and all those complexities. I completely agree that it's not getting easier. There's more and more things to consider.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So I just want to now spotlight a kind of another time in your career where you were working with the Institute for Healthcare Improvement. Could you just tell us a little bit about that? What was different in working in that environment compared to maybe some of the NHS work that you've mentioned so far?
Yeah, so I was really fortunate that 10, 11 years ago is that I got the opportunity to go off to the US for a year and spend a year working with the Institute for Healthcare Improvement. And I was really lucky to be sponsored by the Health Foundation in the UK to do that. So for those of you who probably all know, the Institute for Healthcare Improvement is an organisation in the US that's been driving patient safety and quality improvement in healthcare for decades now, and they're probably some of the world's leading experts in that. So to spend a year there, sort of learn from those and understand, develop my skill set and my expertise, was a massive opportunity. But as part of that, I got the opportunity to travel around, the US, the UK, looking at really great organisations and systems, and there's similarities. We've the same challenges. We've got safety problems. They've got flow problems like we have in the UK. But equally, at the same time, is that there are differences. Is the planned care is perhaps has a stronger focus than in terms of the way that the hospital works. Sometimes they have the opportunity to put EDs on divert, which is not something that we would do in the UK. So our planned care system is much more heavily impacted. But at the same time, is that they're grappling with the same challenges. They're trying to deliver improvements in the way that we are here in the UK. But I had the opportunity to see some incredible organisations, and at the same time is that I had the opportunity to see organisations that again were using Simul8, we're using other simulation methods to really think about how they sort of plan, how they drive their improvements, how they right size wards, but equally at the same time how strategically they're using these methods to actually think about, well, if we're building a hospital, how big does it need to be, and what do we need to factor in? And there was some incredible models that I got the opportunity to see, Tom.
Fantastic. Yeah, it sounds great to have that experience. Did you kind of bring any ideas back then for like Wales from this trip? Was there anything that you kind of thought, oh, they maybe do it better?
Well, not necessarily ideas to Wales, but I got the opportunity to go straight out to the Middle East after I'd been in the US, and certainly took some of my ideas. And two things that I really wanted to do is, one is that I really wanted to hone my skills in improvement, which Qatar was just an amazing place to do that. And if I ever get the chance again, I'd love to go back. But at the same time, is that I really, really, really wanted to actually build a team that actually could use these modelling techniques to actually really think through some of the things that we were trying to do in Qatar at that time, whether it was safety, but also investing in systems and services, and improve the flow across the hospital, etc. And we did some good work, and hopefully, fingers crossed, touch wood, is 7-8 years since I left, I'm hoping that the team are still there and actually building those simulations.
Yeah, I mean, I really enjoyed my time there as well. I think it was a great place, and really interesting to see the kind of cultural differences and how that maybe made an impact on the healthcare that was out there. Yeah, I'd be interested to hear, some of the things that you did to, help build the skills of that team. Because I know I was out there sort of working with you, and it did feel like it was a really good team that you had. And I'm sure a lot of that team will have probably might not be working at the place anymore. But I think you definitely did a lot of really good things to help build up the skills. Just keen to hear a bit more about that, really. What worked well in terms of building a team.
And it probably is something that we replicated slightly when I was working with the modelling team when I came back to Wales as well. Is that
Uh-huh.
we were obviously very fortunate in that you came out and taught us, but then what we did regularly is that we regularly shared models together, so we were just learning and just sort of trying to share problems really, and actually try and work out well, we've got this to model, is how would we do it, what code would we use if we needed to use any code, and then just sort of really, and even simple models at that time, Tom, it was just sort of getting used to the software, how you build these models and things. And gradually is that we started to build up a little library of simple models that people just started to look at when we'd found something cool that we could do with the software. We'd share it, and then as we gradually got a little bit better and more effective, we were building models like the donation centre. We also did a model in and around critical care units. We really were pulling it together and really trying to pull it apart just to make sure that actually they were right and they were valid and they were validated and there wasn't anything that we'd missed. But at the same time, and again, as I think you came out and supported us in doing this, is then trying to really showcase it to the rest of Qatar as as part of the improvement conference that they had on a yearly basis, is that we built some, again, simple, straightforward models that the team sort of demonstrated and highlighted. And again, it was getting people to experience the use of simulation, but maybe sort of challenge some of their thinking. I think I can remember Carolyn doing a sort of model around, how big a ward needed to be, and we were doing models about, well, what would happen to what would happen to the queue in the ED if we discharged a couple of hours earlier and things like that, and just really just sort of getting people to just sort of think in a slightly different way.
Really interesting sort of questions that you probably people are asking themselves all the time, but having that simulation to help structure your thoughts, I can see how that would be really helpful. But yeah, a couple of really interesting things you touched on there. Building smaller models, working together as a team. I think you triggered a bit of a memory for me there. I'm pretty sure it was you who the team actually started off building their coffee shop. Maybe was there a coffee shop in the hospital and they just built a simple flow to get started?
We gosh, I'd forgotten that. Is that we sat there in the coffee shop and we modelled the coffee shop.
Yeah, that was.
We had,
remember that. It's nice to do these simple things. It's good to not even focus on necessarily the bigger problems first, but just get some practice.
You're right. Is I'd forgotten that, but actually, one of the things, and it's why, and I think it was you that suggested that we did this, is because everybody was coming in and ordering different things, and so there was different service times, and we'd see people arrive at different rates, and it helped us actually with the concept of modelling, but the other thing is actually helping us just think through as well, how would we model, how would you do this in Simulate, how would we use things like batch and collect, and some of the more sort of complex elements of simulation. And actually it was a really good exercise to do as a team, and I think what we ended up with is 4 or 5 slightly different models that we could then sort of compare and just sort of see, because I think if you and I did a model of a system, we'd have probably 2 slightly different models, because we all sort of model in slightly different ways.
Yeah, there's not necessarily a right or a wrong way, but yeah, it's really good to get team collaboration on this. And you also mentioned that idea of sharing the simulation, and I agree that's a really kind of powerful way to get it embedded is by sharing it and making sure that people are aware about what it can do and how it can help. So I think it was really good to use the sort of conferences that you had there, and also, you know, just generally share the models with stakeholders. Um, so I guess thinking about, you know, developing economies in the future, what do you see the combination of technology and health services being that supports that?
That's a great question. You know, I've not been in the Middle East now for 7 or 8 years, so you know what I do know from colleagues who are still out there, and you know from things that I see on social media, is that they're just sort of massively pulling in technology, and you know some of it is. Qatar's very fortunate. It's a country that has great wealth, so they can invest really well. But I think their ability to adopt technology and their desire to adopt technology is really strong. And if some of that, yes, potentially because of wealth, but equally at the same time, some of it may well be that they don't have long intractable histories of delivering healthcare in the way that we do in the West, and it may well be that those sorts of economies are more amenable to sort of transformation and change more rapidly. Is that they've got mobile technologies. I think they're using hopefully still using the modelling. I know somebody's out there who's still part of that team that's moved into a sort of more senior position within the organisation and around sort of planning. So I have no doubt that they're using those things. But the adoption of big data science and AI, I have no doubt that they're absolutely adopting those things, and perhaps at a rate faster than we are here in the West.
Oh, right. That's interesting. I know, I think certainly in the NHS, there's more and more adoption of those sort of data science technologies, and I think more and more people can write code in R and Python and that sort of thing, and hook that up to a simulation. So it's interesting to see that that's maybe moving at an even faster rate in other places.
Yeah, I can remember there was somebody I used to work with in Wales who used to say, in 15 years is that you can't be a doctor if you can't code.
All right.
Yeah. I can code, but I'm a geek. But it is one of those things. It's technology is changing, job roles are changing, and we're going to have to adopt these technologies, which means at some point we're going to have to understand. Maybe we do need to learn how to code as doctors.
Yeah, it'd be an interesting skill set. So I want to just come back around to the more sort of softer side of simulation. So I mean, obviously, I think any conversation around healthcare you'd always want to have discussion with people at the center of it. What do you think the kind of ideal relationship is between people and technology in any sort of transformation project?
Well, and I think this is where we see transformation work really well, but equally at the same time, perhaps transformation not achieve its intended output, is that we need to design and develop the technologies around the individuals that are using it, as opposed to necessarily implementing a technology and then forcing people to change, if that makes sense. We may need to ask people to change because they need to change in the first place, but we always need to have the user at the center of how we design it. I think if we were to think about this in terms of using simulation and simulators, one of the things that I've always been interested in is that it's great that I can build a model and I can put it up and get people to sort of look at it on a big screen as I present it and show the outputs. Is one of the things that I think is always really interesting, is that what if we gave the model to them and actually developed an interface that actually helps them use it, and they can walk away and actually really dig into it. And again, is that there are things that you can do in Simul8 where we can develop those those sorts of interfaces, but I think it is one of those things that we really do need to just really focus on, is how do we put the user at the center of what we're doing.
Yeah, I think it's really good to have the users be able to use the inputs as well, but also probably in terms of developing an effective tool? Do you do things like workshops and that kind of thing when you're developing a simulation?
Yeah, and certainly, the last sort of big simulations that I've done, so whether it was the bed model or the the work that we're doing around blood donation in the Middle East, is that we workshopped regularly to make sure that actually what we were building actually looked and felt like what people were experiencing. And then as we were sort of pulling the data in and validating it, is really working closely in those workshops, whether it's clinicians or whether it was managers, to really validate, is this producing the output that you're expecting? And at the same time, is what are you intending to get out? What answers are you looking for? And sometimes, and I've been guilty of doing this, I built a simulation model and produced a load of outputs, and then they've gone, well, that's great, but that's not actually the problem that I was asking you to look at. So absolutely, desperately needs to make sure that we workshop regularly. It isn't a one-off thing, and that real interaction with the team and the people who are sort of really wanting to think about a problem. And at the same time, Tom, is you will have experienced this, is that we want a simulation, but we don't know what the problem is we're asking, and sometimes just helping people articulate the problem is part of the challenge of developing these.
Yeah, I've definitely been there myself, getting drawn into a nice piece of code and seeing what it produces, rather than, is it giving the information that you want or that people need? So yeah, I really like that approach. So I just want to move on to a topic that's really interesting for Simul8 at the moment, and get your take on it. But we've been seeing a lot of growth in sort of digital twins recently. Where people are using simulations for recurring use. They may be hooked up to a live database, and they are, you're able to run the simulation in real time and then pause it and project forward to make different decisions. I'm just wondering if that's anything that you've seen or thought about. I know there's, a lot of hospitals are getting connected up to, real-time patient tracking and things like that. So I'd be interested to hear your take on how that could be leveraged.
So it's not, I was honest, it's not something that I've necessarily seen really great examples of, but it's definitely something that I've discussed with members of my team, and I remain convinced that actually we can predict a lot of flow challenges and harm events from people as soon as they appear in the front door, and the ability to let's say we had a model of an ED that was well validated, and actually we're putting in data in a real-time basis, is that we could be giving heads up to the rest of the hospital and potentially the wider system if we've had a bad day in the ED, is that that in 24 hours we're going to have a difficult challenge in the rest of the hospital and potentially wider. Likewise, we may be seeing changes in primary care that we could feed that data in, that we know that actually in the next couple of days that's going to actually feed its way into the hospital. Huge potential, and the challenge I guess we've got is getting access to the data to enable us to actually start to build those. Not necessarily as digital twins, but you take the organizations that we would say are really high performing and high reliability, is that they might not be using digital twins, but they're using sort of manual applications of doing something very similar, and actually building that situational awareness and actually really knowing, so what's happening, what's happening now, and where do we think it's going to happen next, and what are the things that we need to do. And imagine putting a simulation into that actually start actually giving a heads up of, well, this is we think is going to happen in the next 4 hours, 8 hours, 12, 48, next couple of days. I know that you've done some stuff, and I think it was the bed pack modeling that wasn't necessarily real time, but also was, you know, able to give us that heads up in terms of beds and bed requirements potentially going forwards.
Yeah, that's it. I mean, that was designed to be able to run on a very regular basis, you know, like every day, you know, for planning and that kind of thing. But I think you've touched on a lot of good things there. You know, it must be so hard to make decisions in a hospital, given all the interconnectedness and the, you know, the fact that what happens in one area one day is going to have a knock-on impact somewhere else the next day. So yeah, we really see an opportunity to make things easier for decision makers and remove some of that inefficiency and flow that's likely to happen because we don't really know what our situation is going to be in 24 hours, so it's a bit harder to plan. So yeah, no, I think really exciting to think about the, you know, the potential there. Okay, great. So one final question for you. I just wanted you to kind of take a look away from your day job at the moment and think of any examples or things that you've been in generally that would lend themselves to sort of process improvement and better outcomes. Doesn't have to be healthcare, could just be something fun or an idea to change the world.
Gosh, an idea to change the world.
It's a big ask.
I'm not going to, well, not an idea to change the world, but, you know, I've certainly used sort of process improvement on my own well-being in the last 12 months. I've lost 30 pounds in weight, and at the same time started running. I'm doing a half marathon in Cardiff at the weekend, and you can't see it because the screen's blurred, and I'm not going to unblur it, but there's a set of charts that's set on that screen, on that board behind me, where I've been plotting the dots, my weights, my distances that I'm running, my pulse. So, you know, they apply to anything. It's just it's how we use them. I'm not sure I'm going to apply using Simul8 at the moment to sort of think about how I'd lose weight, but at the same time, is that, you know, maybe there's a model I need to build there, Tom.
Well, congratulations on that. That's really impressive weight loss, and yeah, good luck with that half marathon. I've done a couple myself, and it's not easy. I hope you've managed to get your training in.
Fingers crossed, touch wood, I have. I think I'll be sore on Monday, but I'm looking forward to it. It's my first one, so really looking forward to it.
No doubt. No, but I mean, yeah, you make a good point. I really stand by the idea that, you know, what gets measured gets improved. So I can see how having this chart and being able to see your progress, see yourself improving, and, you know, think about what you need to do to stay on that same trajectory must be really helpful.
Yeah, no, it has been, and you know, it's incredibly motivating, which is the other thing that you see in improvement. As soon as people in healthcare see dots move and they're going in the right direction, they want to do more.
Yeah, yeah, you can imagine, and I think that's, you know, lends itself to tracking simulations against the real situation as well. You know, if you're seeing simulations showing one thing and you're getting improvements aligned to that, or even better, it's good to have that kind of cyclical loop and think about, you know, what am I doing well, what am I not doing well. It'd be like, I'm imagining with your weight loss, it might be, oh, my weight stagnated this week, maybe shouldn't have had that extra pizza. I guess the same thing can apply to a project where, you know, because you're tracking it and seeing the information, it's helpful to sort of keep on changing and tweaking what you're doing.
Yeah, absolutely.
Great. Well, thanks so much for speaking to me today. That's been really interesting, but I think now it's time to just wrap things up. So yeah, thanks again. Thanks so much for your time. Thanks for sharing all that valuable experience. It's been great chatting to you. And if anyone listening would like to find out more about the things that we've discussed today, then please do get in touch. So thank you, John.
Thanks for having me, Tom.
No problem. Yeah, I'll speak soon. Okay. Goodbye.
Thank you. Take care.